I lied my way into a nanny job and fell for the baby daddy. Standing in front of the huge steel gates, my heart was racing like it would burst. The ad that I found last night had almost seemed too good to be true. A nanny position with pay that could solve all my problems. Now, staring up at the mansion beyond, I was starting to think it was the trap of a serial killer. My finger betrayed me, trembling just a little as I pressed the intercom button. A crisp voice came almost immediately. Yes. Hi, I squeaked, then cleared my throat. I'm Cole Santos. I'm here for the nanny position. There was a pause, a buzz, and the gate started to creak open, really slowly. I took a big breath of air and walked up the long driveway. Before I reached the door, it opened. A small blonde in a white uniform gestured for me to enter. Her name was embroidered over the left breast, Joanna. She regarded me with one perfectly shaped eyebrow arching upwards. The nanny? She asked, her tone loudly proclaiming her disbelief. I squared my shoulders, dredging up every last shred of confidence I could find. Yes, ma'am. Is Mr. Rochester expecting me? The maid's lips shook like she was barely holding in a laugh. Mr. Ashworth is in his study. Follow me. I scowled at her emphasis on Ashworth. The name of the person on the job I applied for was Rochester, but this was the right address. Regardless, I followed her through the foyer that was bigger than my entire college dorm room, trying not to stare at the crystal chandelier or the honest-to-God suit of silver armor standing in one corner. Who lived like this? Joanna rapped twice on a heavy wooden door at the end of the hallway. Mr. Ashworth, the nanny is here. Send her in, said a deep voice from within. Her? Before I could think, Joanna opened the door, gestured for me to enter, and then closed it behind me with a soft click. I found myself in a study that looked like it had been plucked straight out of a period drama, and behind a massive desk sat the most handsome man I had ever laid eyes on. He lifted his face from a stack of papers, and I swear my heart stopped for a second. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with just the right amount of stubble, and eyes an intense green reminding me of a peaceful meadow. You're the nanny? He asked, his brow furrowing in some confusion. I swallowed hard, willing myself not to blush. Yes, sir. Cole Santos. Nice to meet you. He stood, and I realized he was tall. Really tall. As he came around the desk, I caught a whiff of his cologne, crisp and woodsy, and my knees went weak. He extended his hand. Ethan Ashworth. As I shook it, trying to ignore the warmth of his skin against mine, he said, I must admit I was expecting a female nanny. Oh? I squeaked, avoiding his gaze. He asked me to come even when I sent my poorly crafted resume. What female nanny is named Cole Santos? I had to ask. Sir, will that be a problem? Before he could answer, a cry resounded through the room. Mr. Ashworth's eyes widened just a bit, and he turned toward a bassinet in the corner that I hadn't seen before. He hesitated a moment and then put his hands in to pick up the noise box. When he turned around, he held a baby, the cutest little girl I'd ever seen, with a curly tuft of dark hair and big round curious eyes. Something in my chest tightened as I looked at her. She was beautiful. This is Kayla, he introduced, his deep voice softening somewhat. The baby squirmed in his arms, looking decidedly unhappy with his awkward hold. Unable to resist, I stepped forward. May I? Mr. Ashworth looked surprised, but nodded, carefully transferring Kayla into my arms. The moment she settled against my chest, her cries quieted to soft whimpers. Hey there, little one, I murmured, gently bouncing her. What's all the fuss about, Kayla babbled noisily to me as if explaining her plight. Unsatisfied with just her words, she then reached out and grasped my nose. I chuckled, and to my astonishment, she giggled back. I glanced up, finding Mr. Ashworth watching us, the look on his face unreadable. You're good with her, he said in awe. I shrugged, trying to affect a casual manner as my heart did its best to keep racing. I have a lot of experience. Lots of experience, aka all the time I spent babysitting my cousins in the Philippines. A tiny little white lie to beef up my resume wouldn't hurt. Mr. Ashworth nodded slowly before heading back to his desk. He scooped up his phone, scowling at the screen as he punched in a number. Excuse me for one moment, I need to call my brother to confirm something. I took that opportunity to really look at Kayla. Beautiful was too small to describe her. As I stared at her, a strange feeling washed over me. I felt drawn to her. I shook my head, brushing the thought away. "You're being silly, Cole," I whispered to myself. "You just met her." Mr. Ashworth cleared his throat to get my attention, his face a little tighter than before. He looked from Kayla to me, then let out a sigh. "It looks like there's been a mix-up from the nanny agency. I wanted a female nanny." "Excuse me? The nanny what?" "Nanny agency. What was that? Oh God. He wasn't the one that invited me for an interview? What exactly was going on? Like I guessed, it was too good to be true. I knew I needed to tell the truth and leave now. Mr. Ashworth placed his phone back on the table with a thud. "But it looks like you're good at what you do, so I am willing to put it aside. The job pays $10,000 a month. Can you begin immediately?" I couldn't believe my ears. $10,000? I yelled, startling the baby in my arms. "Okay, can I have her back?" Mr. Ashworth pulled Kayla back into his arms. "Is the pay too low?" "It's just the first month, of course. It'll increase as the months go by." I swear, he just called me broke in a million different languages. "No," I exclaimed swiftly. "No, sir, that's more than generous." Mr. Ashworth nodded and then slid a thick contract across the desk. "Sign this and the job is yours." I frowned. Obviously, I'm not the person he thinks I am. What if he sued me after I signed the contract? But then, I thought of my mom, who was still sickly, and the pile of tuition bills for the next semester that sat on my desk at home. I thought of all the times I'd had to choose between textbooks and groceries. Taking a deep breath, I picked up the pen. "Where do I sign?" Whatever I was getting myself into had to be better than what I had to do for money prior to this, right? Anything would be better than that. 2 weeks later. The past few weeks passed slowly. I lived each day in fear of Mr. Ashworth getting me arrested for fraud, but Kayla made it all better, just like today. "Kayla, sweetie, please," I begged, holding up a spoonful of carrot puree. "Just one bite. For me?" Kayla stared at me, pouting. Then, in a flash, she swatted the spoon, sending orange goop flying across the kitchen and onto my face. "Having trouble?" My heart dropped, and I turned to find Mr. Ashworth leaning against the door frame, an amused smile kicking at the edges of his mouth. My heart did a little flip at the sight of him, as it had been doing embarrassingly often this past week, both out of fear and attraction to his devastatingly handsome face. No trouble at all," I stuttered, gesturing to the carrot-splattered kitchen with a grin. "Kayla and I just thought the walls could use some redecorating." Mr. Ashworth chuckled, the sound low and husky enough to turn my insides to jelly. "Right, though I'm not sure orange is the right color scheme." He came to stand beside me, close enough that the scent of his cologne was distracting, to say the least. His fingers just grazed mine, sending an electric feeling right up my arm as he reached for the spoon. "Let me try." I watched in fascination as Mr. Ashworth bent down to Kayla's level. "Listen up, young lady. I know you and these carrots have their differences, but I think if you give them a chance, you might actually like them." To my utter amazement, Kayla opened her mouth and took the spoonful of carrots without a single protest. "How did you do that?" I asked, amazed. Mr. Ashworth rose, a smug smile on his face. "She responds well to reason." I laughed, shaking my head. "She's barely 6 months old." "And clearly very intelligent," he replied, his eyes dancing with delight. Our eyes met, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. There was something about his eyes that made my heart rate quicken. Mr. Ashworth glanced at his watch. "I've got a conference call in 5 minutes. Will you be okay finishing up here?" I nodded. "Of course, Mr. Ashworth." "Ethan." "Excuse me?" I spluttered. "Call me Ethan." Oh boy, I am in so much trouble. 3 weeks later. Over the next 2 weeks, I quickly settled into a routine here. I'd come to work at the break of dawn and leave when night fell. Usually, Ethan would be home before I left, but he was probably running late today. I said my goodbyes to Joanna. She didn't reply as usual. I strolled out of the mansion. It was a 5-minute walk, and just as I reached the gate, I pulled my phone out to order an Uber. That's when I felt the first drop of rain. In just a few seconds, it started to pour, heavily. Great. Just great. I did not know whether to make a run back to the house or head out in the rain until my Uber arrived. Before I had finished considering, a pair of headlights shone down on me, momentarily blinding me. As the car pulled up, I realized it was Ethan's sleek black Audi. My heart gave an excited leap as Ethan hopped out in an instant, concern furrowing his perfect face. "Cole, what are you doing out here in the rain?" I opened my mouth to say something but only managed some sort of word vomit. I was just smooth, Cole. Real smooth. Ethan didn't wait for me to get my stammering out. He just reached over and snatched my arm, unlocked the passenger door, and pushed me in gently. "Get in, you're soaked." Sliding into the passenger seat, Ethan shrugged off the suit jacket and laid it over my shoulders. The scent of his cologne wrapped around me, and I snuggled into it without even realizing it the entire ride back to the house. God, he smells amazing. Ethan quickly parked the car. Then we made a mad dash for the house. His arm wrapped around me to shield me from the rain, and I tried to stop fixating on how solid he was against me, or on how my skin tingled when it touched his. Once inside, Ethan turned towards me. "Follow me," he commanded, heading up the stairs. Why?" I asked, suddenly nervous. He turned around, looking at me with one eyebrow raised. "You need to change out of those wet clothes." "Oh, no, I don't need to. I can ask Joanna," I started to protest, but a sneeze cut me off. "You know, you're kinda cute when you're stubborn like this." I felt my face go red. Did he just call me cute? Blushing furiously, I followed him to his room. It was my first time in here, and I was dripping wet. Ethan went into his closet and returned with fresh clothes quickly. "Here," he said, holding them out to me. "I'm fine," I tried again, but the sneezes hit me back to back. Ethan rolled his eyes, stepping closer. "Don't be ridiculous," he chided, laying his hands on my white shirt's buttons. My mind short-circuited. Ethan Ashworth was about to strip me naked. I tried to take a backward step, but I tripped over my feet in my fluster. I fell back onto the bed, and in my embarrassment, I'd grabbed Ethan's shirt, pulling him down with me. We landed with a soft oof. Ethan's body pressed against mine. I stared up into his dark green eyes. My pulse was racing so hard, I was sure he'd feel it against his chest. His face was inches from mine, and in that crazy instant, I thought he would kiss me. What would his lips feel like? Were they as soft as they appeared? And beyond my control, I sneezed in his face. Achoo! A wave of horror washed over me. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I half yelled as I rubbed all over his face with my sleeve. I eventually noticed the corners of his mouth twitching, realizing just how ridiculous this whole situation was. I started giggling, and after a moment, Ethan joined in. The sound of his laughter, deep and sincere, made my stomach do backflips. As our laughter faded, Ethan flicked my nose, seemingly unbothered by his body being on top of mine. "You know, I don't regret hiring you, Cole. Not for a second." My laughter caught in my throat. If only he knew the truth, that I wasn't really from any agency, that I'd lied my way into this job, into his life, into his daughter's life. What if he found out? Would he dismiss me from his sight, never to lay eyes on Kayla again? Never to lay eyes on him again? But looking up at Ethan, at the warmth in his eyes, I couldn't bring myself to confess it now. Not yet. Not when everything felt so perfect. So right. The next day. The rain didn't let up, so I slept in the Ashworth mansion. Not in Ethan's room, of course. Instead, he got Joanne to clean up the guest room for me. For some reason, the air this morning smelt a million times better. I hummed softly to myself as I folded another of Kayla's tiny onesies, a small smile tugging at my lips. It was so quiet in the laundry room, the only sounds being the soft whir of the dryer and the rustling of the fabric as I worked. Kayla was still sleeping, so I took the opportunity to get her things in order. A light knock at the door frame called my attention, and I looked up. Joanna stood there, carrying a plate of freshly cut fruits. "Thought you might want something to snack on," she added, her tone a little uncertain. I blinked in surprise. This was new since I had started working here. Joanna had been cordial yet distant. I immediately recognized this for what it was, an olive branch. "Thanks, Joanna," I smiled warmly, putting aside the laundry and taking the plate. "This is so nice of you." Joanna shrugged, but I caught a pleased smile on her lips. "It's nothing. Figured you could use a break from all that folding." I popped a grape into my mouth and savored the burst of sweetness. "Want to join me?" I offered, nodding toward the little coffee table in the living room. Joanna hesitated for a moment before nodding. We sat down, and I waited, feeling she had something on her mind. "So," Joanna started, fiddling with the edge of her apron, "how are you settling in? Is Kayla behaving herself?" I chuckled. "She is an angel, most of the time. Though I swear she's got a vendetta against Carrots. We shared a laugh, and some of the tension between us dissipated. But before I could respond, a commotion from the front of the house drew our attention. The front door slammed, and heavy footsteps noisily charged up the stairs. I saw a glimpse of a man who looked disturbingly similar to Ethan. "Who is that?" I shouted in alarm. Joanna's expression turned grim. "Leave him. That is Mr. J, Mr. Ashworth's stepbrother, J. Rochester." "What? I never knew Ethan had a brother." Joanna leaned forward. "Oh, there is so much you don't know. You see, Mr. Ashworth's mother remarried after Mr. Ashworth's father passed away. Jay is the product of that, always up to no good. Wait, his surname was Rochester. My mind flashed back to the job ad that got me here in the first place. The name of the person was Rochester. This Jay idiot caused all of this." I found myself leaning forward, curiosity getting the best of me. "What kind of no good?" Joanna looked around as if to make sure no one was listening. "Well, it all begun about a year ago. You see, Mr. Ashworth, he's not really the relationship type, you know. He is far too busy with his work. Yet, he has plans to have children, only much later in life. So, he had some of his, stuff frozen. For later, if you know what I mean." "What in the world?" Ethan was truly a weirdo, and his brother was worse. "Anyway," Joanna continued, "Mr. J's girlfriend at the time, oh my, she was a nasty piece of work. She somehow convinced the doctor at the clinic to give her Mr. Ashworth's sample, got herself inseminated without telling anyone." My eyes went wide. "Wait, so Kayla is—" "That's the thing," Joanna cut in. "Well, when Mr. Ashworth found out, he was livid. Still, he felt some sort of responsibility, you know, so he gained custody of the baby when she was born, but then he got a DNA test done, and it turns out Kayla isn't even his." The room spun. This was a 9 p.m. melodrama. "Whose is she then?" Joanne shrugged. "Nobody knows. Mr. Ashworth's been trying to find out, but the clinic's records are a mess. All we know is she's not his or Jay's." Before I could process this bombshell, raised voices from upstairs made us turn around. A moment later, Jay stormed down the stairs. "You can't keep punishing me for this, Ethan," he yelled over his shoulder. "It's not my fault the doctor gave her your sperm sample." With that, Jay slammed out of the house, leaving a ringing silence in his wake. The anxiety in my heart settled. Jay wasn't going to expose me, at least not for now. Joanne clicked her tongue in disapproval. "That boy," she grumbled. "Always with excuses, always coming back to ask for money." A part of me felt sad for Ethan. He literally had no family left. No wonder he's still caring for Kayla. She's all he has. "Cole, that's a lesson to be learned," Joanna faced me. "Never be a lying piece of scum like him. It never ends well." I felt the blood drain out of my face as Joanna's words hit home. I thought of how I got this job. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I was exactly like Jay. A month later. "Cole? Cole, wake up!" I jolted awake, momentarily disoriented. I was in the living room of the Ashworth mansion, sprawled out on the ridiculously comfortable couch. Ethan was leaning over me, his face etched with concern. "What?" I mumbled, rubbing my eyes. "What time is it?" "Just past midnight," Ethan said softly. "You fell asleep while studying." I sat up, wincing as my textbook fell to the floor with a thud. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to fall asleep on the job." Ethan's lips quirked up in a small smile. "It's okay, Cole, but if I may ask, why are you working so hard as a student?" He was close, so close I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, smell the woodsy scent of his cologne. My heart raced, and I found myself leaning in ever so slightly. "You'd be surprised at how many weird jobs I've taken. I needed to take care of my mom. She was really sick last year. Cancer. Paying for her surgery and chemotherapy took a lot out of me." Ethan patted my hair sympathetically. "Chemo? That must have cost a lot. Your former nanny job must have paid well. Do I need to pay you more?" My heart dropped. What nanny job? I know what I did last year to get that money. It was devastating, and I swore I would never do it again. What would Ethan think of me if he found out, prior to being his baby's nanny, that I was a sperm donor? I avoided Ethan's gaze, holding back my tears. It would be totally shameless to ask him for a pay raise. "No, you don't need to pay more. You're already being extremely generous." Okay, sleep in the guest room, not here. Good night. I nodded, trying to ignore the frustration settling in my chest. Thanks, Ethan. Good night. As I watched him walk away, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd imagined the flash of longing in his eyes. The next morning. I couldn't bring myself to get out of bed the next morning, but a call from my mother did the trick. Cole, are you there? I jolted out of my Ethan-induced daydream at the sound of my mother's voice on the phone. Sorry, Ine. What were you saying? I was asking about your tuition for next semester, she said, concern lacing her voice. Do you have enough? You know I can try getting a loan. No, I interrupted quickly. Don't worry about it, Ine. I've got it covered. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Cole, you didn't go back to that clinic, did you? I know we needed the money before, but... No, I shouted, then lowered my voice, remembering I was still inside the Ashworth mansion. No, nothing like that. I got a really good job. It pays well. Oh, that's wonderful. The relief in her voice was palpable. What kind of job? I hesitated, not sure how to explain my situation. It's a caretaking job for a family. That sounds perfect for you, Anak. You've always been so good with children. As she continued chatting, I felt a pang of guilt. I hated keeping secrets from her, but how could I explain that I was falling for my ridiculously attractive, probably straight boss while caring for his baby? 4 days later. Ethan gave me the weekend off. It was supposed to be enjoyable, but I missed Kayla so much. Joanna said he has been busy contacting the fertility clinic to find Kayla's real father. I don't know why he was so obsessed with it. A thought kept me awake all night yesterday. Who received my sample? What if one day my child decides to find me? I barely got a wink of sleep, but I'd get to see Kayla today, so it didn't matter. As I approached the front door, raised voices from inside stopped me, my hand hovering over the doorknob. I recognized Ethan's voice sharp with anger, and another that sounded similar yet unfamiliar. Swallowing hard, I pushed open the door. The scene that greeted me was like walking into the eye of a hurricane. Ethan stood in the living room, his immaculate hair now disheveled, his face red with anger. Across from him stood Jay, his face equally angry. You had no right, Jay, Ethan exclaimed, his voice low and dangerous. Posting the job on some random website, pocketing the nanny agency fee? What were you thinking? My blood ran cold. Oh no. Jay huffed and rolled his eyes. Come on, Ethan, it's not like anything bad happened. The kid's been great with Kayla, hasn't he? What's the big deal? The big deal? Ethan growled. It's that I trusted you. It's that you put Kayla at risk. I trusted that he came from the agency. We had no idea who this guy was. No background check, nothing. Then you should have given me the money I asked for then. If you did, I wouldn't have wanted the agency fee, Jay snapped, lacking all sorts of remorse. If I didn't call the agency to ask about their payment structure for long-term employment, I would have never known, Ethan yelled, holding back from punching Jay. I stood there frozen, as suddenly my legs felt like jelly. The floor seemed to sway beneath me and I stumbled, catching myself on the doorframe with a thud. Both men turned at the noise, their eyes landing on me. Jay's widened in surprise, then narrowed calculatingly. Without another word, he stormed past me, shoulder-checking me hard enough that I stumbled again. For a very long time, Ethan and I just stared at each other. The anger in his eyes made my heart contract with pain. Ethan, I started to say, but he cut me off. Is it true? He asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Are you really just some random person from a job site? I opened my mouth and shut it and opened it. No words would come out. My silence was an answer nonetheless. Ethan's expression set like concrete and his jaw clenched. How could you, Cole? I trusted you. I let you into my home, into my life, into Kayla's life. I'm so sorry, I whispered. Tears pricked my eyes. I never meant to. I needed the money. You never meant to what? Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. To lie? To deceive me? God, Cole, do you have any idea what could have happened? You could have been anyone. It's always money. What's wrong with you people? His words were blows, and I flinched at each one. I know, but Ethan, please. You have to believe me. I never meant any harm. I needed the job so badly. You should have told me, Ethan said coldly. The moment you realized there was a mix-up, you should have come clean. I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. You're right, I should have. I was scared, and then I got to know Kayla and you, and I trailed off, aware of how weak my excuses sounded. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration written across his features. "Get out." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Ethan, please let me explain." "Explain what? How you lied to me? How you made me fall for you?" He bit off his words, his jaw clenching. "Just go, Cole. Now." By now the tears were streaming down my face. "Please, Ethan, can I at least say goodbye to Kayla?" "No." And he meant it. 3 weeks later. The next 2 weeks felt like forever. I couldn't concentrate in classes, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every day I found myself drawn back to the mansion, hoping for a glimpse of Ethan or Kayla, but the gates remained closed and the curtains drawn. I sat on the bench across the street and watched the house for hours on end. Sometimes I saw Joanna through a window or Kayla's laughter carried on the wind, but never Ethan, never Kayla. I was hunched over my desk trying to make some sense out of my economics textbook when my phone suddenly buzzed. A credit alert from my bank and an email notification. The credit alert was from Ethan. $30,000. The money didn't even raise a spark of joy in me. It reminded me of my place. As an employee, nothing more to Kayla, nothing more to Ethan. Unable to keep it, I considered withdrawing it in cash and mailing it to Ethan. Half-heartedly, I checked the email notification and my heart stopped. It was from the sperm donor facility I'd used once, over a year ago. With shaking fingers, I opened it. It was a short jumble with one clear message. The family that received my sample wanted to meet me. The facility had insisted on anonymity, except I was willing to. My mind was reeling, so that meant I had a child out there. All it was prior to receiving this mail was a desperate measure, a way to help pay for my mom's medical bills, but now, before I could overthink it, I hit reply and typed out a quick affirmative response, asking if they could send the address. I wanted to meet the family too. What did I have to lose at this point? The clinic's response came in minutes, but as I opened it, the phone slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. The address they'd sent was Ethan's. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at my phone on the floor. My mind reeled as thoughts whirled within my head. There could only be one child there. Kayla was mine. My daughter, my little girl. All this time, and I never knew. I had no recollection of running out of my dorm, and I couldn't recall hailing an Uber or how the frantic ride to the mansion was. All I could think was, I gotta see them. I gotta explain. When I arrived, panting and wild-eyed, Joanna answered the door. Her eyes were wide with surprise. "Cole? What are you—" "Where's Ethan?" I gasped out. "I need to see him now." The expression on Joanna's face turned sympathetic. "Oh dear, he just went out to find you, at your dorm. He and Kayla have been a mess without you around." I stood there for a second and absorbed that. Then I pivoted on one heel and took off running, leaving Joanna shouting behind me. Miraculously, though, I succeeded in hailing another Uber. It was a long drive. My leg bounced up and down nervously, and I kept checking my phone, half expecting some message from Ethan. Nothing. Finally, we pulled up to my campus dorm. I tossed cash at the driver and jumped out, frantically scanning the area until I saw them. Ethan trudged away from my dorm building, defeated, his shoulders slumped. Kayla was crying in his arms, her small face red and scrunched up. "Ethan!" I yelled, dashing towards them. He turned, eyes wide with surprise. Before he could utter a word, I flung my arms around him and Kayla, holding them tightly. Kayla's cries abruptly stopped, and she clung to me, her little fists in my shirt. I felt Ethan momentarily stiffen before his free arm came about me, holding me close. "Cole," he sighed, his voice thick with emotion. We need to talk." I pulled back, nodding. "I know, but before that, Joanna told me you've been looking for Kayla's real father." Ethan's eyes went wide, surprised by the sudden question. "Yeah, I just want Kayla to know him. I want to know him. I hate the mystery." I choked back a sob, unsure of how to tell him. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opening the mail for him to read. His expression danced between mortification and shock. He glanced down at Kayla and then up to me, saying, "What? How is that possible?" I took a deep breath, trying to still my racing heart. "Remember when I told you I did some weird things to pay for my mother's chemo? This was one of them. It was just once. I never thought—" Ethan's expression was unreadable. He shifted Kayla in his arms, placing her next to me, searching for some resemblance. "But you don't look anything alike," he said, his tone uncertain. A laugh escaped me. "She does look like me," I insisted, reaching out to stroke Kayla's cheek. "You're just not looking close enough." Ethan's eyebrows furrowed, and I could almost see the cogs whirring away in his head. "This is a lot to process, Cole. I don't know what this means. For us, for Kayla. My heart sank. I know it's complicated, Ethan, but I never meant to lie or fall in love with you. Both of you. But I did. And I am so sorry for lying. For a long moment, Ethan just looked at me. Then, to my utter shock, he started to laugh. This is insane, he said, shaking his head. Absolutely insane. I hired a nanny, fell in love for the first time in my life, and it turns out he's the biological father of the child I've been raising. It's like a bad soap opera. My heart skipped a beat. You fell in love with me? Ethan's laughter faded, replaced by a soft smile that made my knees weak. Yeah, Cole, I did. God help me, I still do. My heart raced as I leaned up, closing the distance between us. Our lips met softly at first, a gentle caress that quickly deepened with months of sexual tension. His free hand cupped my face, thumb stroking my cheeks as he poured every ounce of his feelings into the kiss. I clung to his shoulders, dizzy with the taste of him, the warmth of his body pressed against mine. Kayla babbled between us, slapping Ethan's cheeks with her little fingers. He pulled away, wincing. Ouch! Ethan's eyes were shining. He brushed a strand of hair from my forehead, his touch tender. I've wanted to do that for so long, he whispered, his voice husky. I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. Me too, I admitted. 3 months later. Ethan spent the next 3 months searching for his missing sample. Thankfully, it was in a facility in California. He got it destroyed with immediate effect. Tired of cleaning up Jay's messes in the name of family, Ethan also cut him off, forcing him to get a job. Nobody was as happy with that decision as Joanna. Ethan hired another nanny to watch over Kayla on days when I had classes, so I mostly got to spend time with her only during weekends like today. I sat on the living room floor, my arms outstretched towards Kayla, who was standing wobbly beside the coffee table, her little face screwed up in concentration. Come on, sweetie, I coaxed. You can do it. Come to Daddy. One wobbly step, then another. Just as she was about to reach me, I felt arms wrap around my waistback, pulling me up onto a warm lap. Ethan, I yelped in shock. Kayla's face scrunched up, and she sat down on her behind with a loud wail. Ethan chuckled in my ear as his warm breath sent shivers down my spine. Oops, he said, with absolutely no remorse. Guess she'll practice walking later. She'll turn 1 in a month. You're coddling. I turned to scold him, but the words died in my throat at the look in his eyes. My breath caught when he leaned into me, his lips brushing my ear. You know, he said in a low, husky murmur, Joanna can teach her walking for now. I'm more in need of your attention. I cut him off with my kiss, my face burning. Ethan, I hissed when we broke apart. When did you get so dirty-minded? He shrugged, a wicked grin playing across his lips. Well, someone did tell me to loosen up. I groaned, picking Kayla up to complete our little human mountain. Don't loosen up anymore, you're such a pervert. But I couldn't hide my smile or the warmth blooming in my chest. This was my family, now unexpected, unconventional, and absolutely perfect. Conclusion. Ethan contacted his lawyers and they're still figuring out the legal implications of custody. I'll have to apply for adoption since I signed a paternity waiver at the fertility clinic. I'm still thinking of how to explain to my mother that I now have a boyfriend and a 1-year-old daughter. That's a story for another day, but right now, I'm blessed. You know, having a kid isn't that bad. The end. Do you think you can forgive your lover's lie? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force. And stay wholesome.